Sonic the Hedgehog's still one of the most famous video game characters of all time, despite Sega having routinely pumped out and rushed more than a few lackluster games over the years. However, in recent years, it seems like Sega's finally realized that the bad Sonic games were starting to outweigh the good ones, and that if changes weren't made, then fans were eventually going to stop blindly buying every Sonic game, which would obviously be disastrous for Sega. And while Sonic Forces might not have been a legendary game by any means, I still think it was a lot better than people give it credit for, and with Sonic Mania coming out of nowhere and being arguably one of the best games in the entire series, I think Sega's on the right track of raising Sonic's stock again. And it doesn't hurt to have a successful movie out either. But even though it's only been about 3 years since the last two mainline Sonic games came out, I think it's about that time where Sega shows us what's next for the Blue Blur. And I dare say that the next game will not only be revealed by the end of the year, but I'll even go one step further and boldly claim that whatever they show us is gonna be awesome. So go on over to my friend Eddie's house, steal his YouTube viewing chair so he'll have something to sit on while you're watching this video, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, the Texas Rattlesnake Cameron all one word, to tell you why Sonic the Hedgehog's next game's gonna be revealed by the end of 2020, and why I think it'll be a good one. Alright, so the main reason why I think Sega's gonna reveal a new Sonic game by the end of 2020, aside from the fact that it's been 3 years since the last game, is that the company's been losing quite a bit of money as of late. And look, I'm not gonna ramble or go digging around on the internet for like 8 hours trying to figure out why that might be, but all I know is that the best way for Sega to make money is by releasing a new Sonic game, and I've gotta give them a little bit of credit for resisting the temptation of rushing a new game out, because while it would lead to some short-term money, devaluing their biggest asset with another mediocre game would be terrible for the long term. You know, kinda like patching a hole in a sinking boat up with duct tape when you'd obviously need flex tape to get the job done. At any rate though, while I do think a new mainline Sonic game is possible for a 2020 release, my men's intuition's telling me that Sega might spend a little extra time on the next game since Sonic Forces wasn't exactly able to light the world on fire after 4 years of work. You might dispute that Forces took 4 years to make by bringing the Sonic Boom games up that came out after Lost World, but even though all 3 of those games tainted Sonic's legacy, they weren't actually made by Sonic Team. They were just spin-offs made to be a tie-in for a TV show and toy line. But even though I really do think Sonic Forces was underrated, the consensus on that game seems to be that it was just whatever, and even I wouldn't say you need to go out of your way to play it. So I think that if Sega really wants to make a Sonic game that hits the ball out of the park, then they're gonna have to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new formula. Given the fact that Forces didn't send review copies out and had a massive Day 1 update makes it pretty obvious that the game was rushed and left room for improvement. But even though I definitely wouldn't call that game perfect or anything, I don't really see what more they could have done with that formula that would have made the game that much better. Honestly, I kinda think the 3D series needs to try something completely new at this point, and I think Sega knows that, but the last time they tried something new was with Sonic Lost World, and it got duped on all over the place for having a run button. But I think the only reason people are so against having a run button in a Sonic game is because they've been conditioned to believe that he's supposed to be running at full speed at all times, which I actually agree with, but for some reason, Sega keeps forcing assloads of slow areas in Sonic games, even though the fast sections are clearly the best part. Earlier games like Sonic Adventures 1 and 2 were able to get away with this since they were early 3D games from a time where everything felt new and fresh, but just because gameplay mechanics worked in the early 2000s doesn't mean they're always gonna work 20 years later. I feel like hardcore Sonic fans probably hate hearing me rip on the 3D formula right now, but all I'm saying is that there's a reason why the games aren't more popular than they are right now. And even though we've all at one point or another defended Sonic so much to the point where we've probably convinced ourselves that certain flaws aren't there, doesn't mean that the games can't be way better, and to do that, I think they need to stick to speed and ditch the slow platforming. I know the original Sonic games on the Genesis were never really all that fast compared to how many slow platforming sections those games had, and the same could even be said for Sonic Mania, which is my favorite game in the entire series, but Sonic in the Third Dimension's always been a little bit more complicated than that. 3D Sonic can be amazing when it's done right, but very underwhelming when it's not, and the shortcomings are usually in the slow sections a lot more than they are in the fast sections. And I think the main reason for that's because the controls are so loose, which works when you're going fast, but when you're supposed to take your time and make more precise jumps, it's way too easy to overshoot and miss your platforms. The double jump in Sonic Colors made this a lot better, but even so, slow platforming in 3D Sonic games just never felt as good as it did in the classic Sonic games, cause like I said, they were never really all that fast to begin with, but now that Sonic's ripping ass at the speed of sound, it's a lot more noticeable when he has to slow down. This is why I'm probably the only person in the entire world who actually liked the run button in Sonic Lost World, cause I really feel like it helped tighten the physics up a little bit, which led to the best slower sections in the entire 3D series. Even though it is kind of a 2.5D series at this point. But even so, most people don't seem to like that game very much, mainly because Sonic shouldn't be slow in the first place, and like I said earlier, I completely agree with you. All I'm saying is that if there has to be slow platforming sections for whatever reason, then the run button really made it a lot better. But I still don't think it's what Sonic ideally needs to be or anything like that. I mean, the main thing you think about when you think about Sonic is speed, and you know what else makes you think of speed? Racing games, but I can't think of very many that make you drive slow for half the game just so they could reward you with being able to step on the gas every now and then. Using speed as a reward made sense on the Genesis and even in Sonic Mania, cause again, those games were never really about speed in the first place. Speed's just the main thing people remember about them, especially back in the 90s. I mean, if you really break it down, like 80 to 90% of those games were just platformers, and on top of that, it's a lot easier to have physics that accommodate 5 and 30 miles an hour as opposed to 5 and 1,000 miles an hour. And no, those aren't Sonic's actual speeds, I'm just using numbers as an example.
The numbers don't lie!
The point I'm trying to make is that if you want to keep speed and slow platforming in the game, then you need to be able to change the pace with a run button. But now that the technology's there, we really shouldn't even have to deal with the slower sections at all anymore. To be fair though, while it has been a little while since I played Sonic Forces, I have a lot more memories of that game where I was hauling ass than I do where I was overshooting jumps in slow platforming areas. But the downside of that is that it only took me about 2 to 3 hours to finish that game because the levels were so short. It's not like the slower platforming sections were non-existent or anything like that. Obviously, Sega could have made more stages or had the stages be bigger, but 30 levels in a Sonic game's pretty reasonable given how big they are. And let's not forget the time they actually did try longer stages in Sonic Heroes, and most of them got to the point where they just overstayed their welcome, so I guess the sweet spot's probably somewhere in the middle. If you ask me though, I think the perfect template for a 3D Sonic game would be the Desert Ruins Zone 2 stage from Sonic Lost World. I'm not saying that one stage is perfect or anything, but I really love how you're constantly on the run, and if Sega really fine-tuned this concept for an entire game, I bet it'd sell like 8 billion copies on day one, especially if they came up with some new power-ups for once. Regardless of what they do, or what I want them to do for the next 3D Sonic game though, shareholders would probably prefer if Sega started pulling in some more money. I'm sure they're probably happy with the success of the Sonic movie, and Persona 5 Royal's probably gonna sell pretty well outside of Japan, but even a mediocre Sonic game seems to do pretty well, and I dare say that a universally beloved one would work wonders for Sega. However, even if 4 years isn't enough for a new 3D Sonic game to at least be revealed by the end of 2020 though, there is obviously the aforementioned 2D series that Christian Whitehead and the gang killed it with in Sonic Mania. And look, I'm not a game designer or anything like that, but now that the first game's out of the way, I'd imagine that making a new Genesis-styled 2D Sonic game could probably be done within 2 to 3 years and still bring much-needed new ideas to the table. Or as crazy as it sounds, maybe even a new Knuckles Chaotix game, but the only reason I bring that up is because Christian Whitehead's mentioned it as a game he'd want to work on at some point. Whether that means porting the 32X game for the first time, or making a brand new one entirely, I don't know, but I figured it was worth mentioning. But while we're on the subject of ports, there are quite a few Sonic games that Sega could always bring into the current generation, though. I kinda feel like Sega's consciously trying to avoid re-releasing games like Sonic Adventures 1 and 2 though, cause last time they did that, a lot of people started realizing that the games haven't aged very well. And if Sega really wants to shed the perception that Sonic games are hit or miss, then maybe it's best they don't remind fans of shortcomings of games that are remembered so fondly. Don't get me wrong, I played the hell out of Sonic Adventure 2, and I'm probably the only person in the universe who actually loves the Knuckles stages, but all I'm saying is that I don't think the average gamer would be blown away by those in the modern day, so cluttering the market with games that have Sonic in the title probably isn't the best way to capitalize on the success of the movie, or give fans their Sonic fix, although that's not to say that there aren't some older Sonic games that wouldn't fit in 2020, like Sonic Colors, Sonic Generations, and goddammit, I think Sonic Lost World deserves another chance. Or, you know, they could always re-release the Sonic Advance or Rush games that everyone seems to forget about for some reason, but I still think Sega's main priority should be to get Sonic Team and Christian Whitehead's gang to focus on brand new Sonic games that freshen the series up. And yes, I do still think it's possible to freshen 16-bit Sonic up if Whitehead's involved, but if that means I need a little extra time, then a few ports would be the next best thing to hold us over, but either way, I'd be shocked if we don't at least hear about a new Sonic game by the end of 2020. Regardless of what happens though, all I ask is that we don't get another Green Hill Zone for like the 88th time or whatever. But anyway, what do you think? Is Sega gonna reveal a new Sonic game by the end of 2020? Do you think a new game might actually come out? Or are we destined for a few ports? Either way, let me know what you think by voting in the upper right-hand corner, leave a comment down below, and as always, I'll try my goddamnedest to respond to everybody. But let me tell you, if there's two people who could easily make brand new Sonic games by the end of 2020, then it would definitely be today's patrons of the day, Mr. Cool Kid and Dojin Shinji. If you want to be badasses like these two, then consider supporting FU Game Crew on Patreon for loot boxes in the mail and other wacky rewards. And if you want to make a cameo, then send pictures or videos of you rocking any FU Game Crew merch like these legendary human beings you see before you. As always, like and share this video anywhere on the internet to help this channel grow. And if you want to prove that you're not down with registered sex offenders, then go ahead and press the subscribe button if you haven't already. My name's Cameron, all one word, and I'll be back with more videos soon.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.